Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The Shadows Podcast. I'm your host, Trip Bodenheimer. And first of all, before we get going, I want to thank everybody for the feedback you've been giving us for the brand new format, brand new look, even the coffee. So it's super awesome to hear everybody out there enjoying everything that we're doing. I'm loving this YouTube thing. This will be I believe, our fourth episode that we've releasing here on YouTube for our October lineup. But I am here today with Don Colliver. He is the author of Wink Transforming Public Speaking with Clown Presence. He is a public speaker and trainer, improv, sketch comedy. This is all right up my alley. So I'm excited for this episode. Don, welcome to the Shadows.
Thank you, Trip. How cool to be here. I've never spoken with an active duty Air Force instructor before. This is the coolest thing.
Yeah, super cool for me too. I've even got my clown. I got killer clowns from outer space. Got some Pennywise behind me. So
all right. And you know, on my side, if I need to drop and give you 20 at any point, I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
All right, we're off to a good start here. Well, we're gonna actually do our fearful five right off the bat to get that out of the way. First thing, top 3 clowns.
Top 3 clowns. Oh gosh, Sacha Baron Cohen does Borat and other characters. Tom Hanks. He may not call himself a clown, but he exhibits many of the traits of vulnerability, authenticity. And then probably Robin Williams, rest in peace. He was great in just the way he was able to be really present and improvise in situations.
Okay, and we're definitely going to unpack that in just a little bit. One job you would never want to do.
Job I'd never want to do. Anything where what's a situation where people just hate you all the time? Like a person who wrote parking tickets. There would never be a time when somebody's like, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you." Like everyone would hate you all the time. Like that would be so hard.
That is true. It's never a good interaction. Thank you for writing that for me.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. I've always said anyone who chooses to be a mover on a day-to-day basis.
That's interesting. Why?
Physical toll it's got to take on your body. Like I could sit here right now and have to clean up this room, and I'm like, I don't want to do it, much less carry a recliner up 8 flights of stairs.
Well, see, your life has physical activity in it in a regular basis. For me, I'm like, I'd probably get in such good shape if I was a mover. Like I see it as this opportunity to get in shape. It'd probably be that way for like 3 days, and then I'd be like, I hate this.
What are you willing to struggle for?
What am I willing to struggle for? I think and this is not like a guru thing that I've learned, that I've always known, but I'm slowly learning. I'm willing to struggle to be of service. Like, because that's pretty much the only clean motive. Like every other motive will eventually get me into trouble. But if I'm there, honestly, I'm here to help. It's clean. And so, yes, I'm willing to struggle for that.
Okay. Next one. Dinner for 3 with 3 historical figures that are no longer with us.
I'm so glad. I just listened to a previous podcast right before this recording, and I came up with this. So first, David Lee Roth. I don't think it wouldn't be a conversation. It would more just be listening, but that would be interesting to be around because I also really respect his showmanship. Jesus Christ. I'm not like a super religious guy, but clearly this dude had something going on. So it'd be really interesting to chat with that person. And then Hunter S. Thompson, because I bet he would be a fascinating conversationalist. And I think if Jesus and Hunter S. Thompson and me were having dinner, that would be awesome because I think it would be really fun. I think David Lee Roth would be too much. He'd be a separate dinner. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I like that answer. And final question for you. What is a fear that you have? And this one's really curious. I'm really curious to see what you have to say on this one, considering what you do
Right.
on a daily basis. So, yeah, what is something that you're afraid of?
Um, I think letting people down that depend on me.
Okay.
That is a nightmare. Would be my worst nightmare.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you survived our 5 rounds, our five fearful 5 questions. So now let's get into your journey a little bit. Kind of set the stage for our listeners. Tell them where you grew up, what your parents did, and what were some of your aspirations as a child.
Totally. Yeah. I grew up in the Detroit area in northern suburb called Birmingham. Upper middle class, great house, great family. Went to a great, was lucky enough to go to a private school, which was great. Um, uh, I went off to college. High school. I'm trying to think of aspirations. I didn't know what was going on. Like same in college. I didn't know. I kind of fumbled around in college. Graduated from Boston University. Came back to Detroit. Started working. I knew I liked video, like
Mm-hmm.
doing kind of video. I was like, maybe I want to do TV. And so I was lucky enough to start working in training videos for the automotive companies, which then, and I knew as I was doing that, it really wasn't floating the boat. And I decided I wanted to travel. And so I saved up some money and quit and drove around the country for a year because I had already been to Europe like right after college for a couple months to do the backpacking thing. And I saw all these Australians and South Africans who were like traveling for like 2 years. And I'm like, man, that's what I want to do. So I drove around the country for a year in a 1990 Toyota Corona, not a Corolla, a Corona station wagon, totally janky car, and like camped and like stayed with friends and like went to national parks and it was totally cool. Um, and through that, I met a TV producer who was producing for the Travel Channel. And at the time, I was shooting a documentary, and she's like, "You should just move to LA. You could get paid to do that." And so I moved to LA, and that brought me into TV production. So I had this very crazy thing, and so TV production was my career for 20 years in LA. I produced and wrote and directed for nonfiction. So I wrote for House Hunters for 10 years. I directed a show called $40 a Day for Rachael Ray. I was the food prep director for that. We
Yeah.
would travel all around and show different restaurants and things, which was amazing. That was the most rock star thing I've ever done because we'd come into these towns and Rachel was there, so they'd all treat us really well and they'd be throwing food at me and I just ate so much. It was so awesome.
I think I recall
Um,
that show.
do you?
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah, the hook was, eating for $40 a day in Cape Cod, and then we would
Yeah. Yeah.
shoot meals and things. Uh and through boy, there's all kind. I'm skipping over all these bummer moments, but I'm just going to go real high level at this point.
Okay.
And as I was doing through this career stuff, I was like, I love telling stories, and I was getting
Yeah.
closer and closer to telling the story myself. It went from like training to nonfiction TV production to then I found improv to then I found clown and then I found actually communicating for brands, like helping them to communicate using my face as the communicator. So it's
Yeah.
just getting closer and closer to engaging and telling stories with an audience. That's kind of been my journey.
What were some of those? I mean, it sounds super glamorous, the TV production piece, but
No.
as I was talking to someone on a previous episode, they were like, behind all the glitz and glamour of TV, and she was a reporter, but she was like, there's a lot of struggles that go into that. What were some of the struggles you endured over those 20 years?
Well, first of all, it is not glitz and glamour. Nonfiction TV is super workaday, world. Like
Mhm.
we were not getting rich. It's not that those budgets are very small, but at the same time, super grateful to do it. Like I'm in the business. I could pay my rent in LA. Sometimes I get to travel to cool places. Um, the challenge for that life of kind of season to season television production is your job is 3 months long and then it's done. You're fired and there's no continuity. So the first couple times in LA coming from Detroit, where I'm like a Midwestern guy of like, my parents were like, you got to have a job. You always got to
Yeah.
be working. Like, I was like, oh my God, I'm unemployed? What? Like
Yeah.
freaking out. But that's just the way it goes. And you
Yeah.
learn, you get on unemployment for a couple months till you get yourself back on a job. You get back on a job, work that. And it's a cycle and it just happens on and
Yeah.
off. And that's just the way it rolls. Like, nobody, I guess that's a thing of the past, is like the career that you stay with one company for years and years.
Yeah. You
So
got to get your Rolex. Got to have benefits.
yeah. So now, as not a Rolex, it's a Rolodex, because now you got to know people and call them up. Hey, it's me. I'm looking for work. And
Yeah.
just being a nice fellow and that people want to work with to stay working. And it worked. Like I started to figure it out and I pieced together a career over 15, 20 years in LA and it worked out great. But
Yeah.
yeah, those times being unemployed at first were pretty scary.
Yeah. It's very similar to what Deb Whitcast said on the previous episode. Talk to us about Rachael Ray. What was that like interacting with her?
Uh, she was great. I
Yeah.
mean, there were two crews. We would travel with two crews. I was the food prep production crew. So the concept of the show was she would go to these restaurants, eat the things, say how great they were, and then she would voice over the prep of it, and the chef would be back like prepping the
Yeah.
actual thing. She wouldn't be there. She's just voice overing it. So I would be shooting the prep of the food. Another crew would be shooting her doing the eating. But we would all travel together. And yeah, she was a real sweetheart, super busy, super driven. This was the time that she was writing all of her cookbooks.
Mm-hmm.
So she was just like, of course she was going to be a huge success. She's such a hard worker. Like I couldn't believe how hard she worked.
Yeah. Any fun stories about interacting with her?
Um, well, we were in Vegas once, and it was like I don't remember what birthday it was, 35 or something. And she took us all out to Nobu Sushi, like
Mm.
on my birthday. And that was, I mean, that's like super expensive. Like I would never go to that
Yeah.
place. And that was so nice. I was just like, I don't even know what I'm eating. This is incredible. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
That's awesome. Uh, so you went from that, and then talk about, was it 2013 where you decided to make a change? You went into clown school. Is that correct?
Well, okay. A couple things happened. So in 2009, I was writing for House Hunters. I was living in Portland,
Okay.
and I had been married for 3 years, and we got divorced. And
Mm.
that was really sad, like super sad. We both did the best we could, but it just didn't work out. And it was kind of the first time in my life where I could tell myself I tried as hard as I possibly could to make this
Yeah.
work, and it did not work. Everything
Yeah.
else in my life, I was like, if I just try harder, I can fix this. But that thing, we just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And that was just crushing, man. And it took and just dealing with that grief was a new thing. It was a thing I'd never done before.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I was in a situation where it was really safe. Like I had work, I had a good place to live in Portland. Um, and through that, it was one of those things like, I'm so sad. Like, what is something dumb that has no benefit that's going to make me feel better? And I started taking improv classes.
Okay.
I'd never done that stuff before in my whole life. And it was one of those things where I walked in, and after the first couple exercises, I was like, this is for me. Where has this been my whole life? And it may have been because of the situation where I was in, but it just clicked. And that suddenly became a part of my life that I would always do. And so it always continued. I continued with the production, And then, as you said, I think it was 2013, I was simultaneously in production and doing some clown performance in Los Angeles. And I got fired from the TV show. And luckily at the time, again, I was in a really supportive environment. Like, I was okay with money for the time. Like, I had a great support system. So I was really able to sit back, not panic, take it in, and make a decision like, you know what? I'm going to start making choices based on, love. Like, what do I love to
Yeah.
do? And admittedly, that's not always a possibility for folks. You know, if someone has a mortgage, like a bunch of kids, like, you can't just be like, I got fired, I'm going to follow my dream. Like, you can't do that. But luckily, because of the situation I was in, I had options to make money. I could still pursue performance, which is not really a money-making way to go. But it really worked out, I think, primarily because of my support system at the time.
When you started doing improv, what's something you really learned about yourself?
That what I come up with and say on impulse in the moment many times is better than anything I could have written beforehand. Like, I'm consistently surprised at my, really great script that I prepared for a presentation. Then someone like does something weird in the Toastmasters room or the audience, or asks me a weird question. And that's the thing everybody remembers. That's the most meaningful moment, when I respond to that off the cuff.
Yeah. When you started doing clown school, how was that?
Well, I'll tell you my first experience of clown. I was in an improv workshop, and a guy was doing a scene, but every time we would laugh, he would like look at us and do whatever he was doing. He would do it more and then continue with the scene. So he was kind of doing audience takes as we were laughing. Or if something went wrong in the scene, he would look at us. If he dropped something, he'd look at us. And that was the first time. That's called the fourth wall, right? In a theater, like if the actors are up there, they're pretending the audience isn't there because there's an imaginary fourth wall. But if they look at the audience and address them, they're breaking the fourth wall. So that's the first time I saw breaking the fourth wall. And it was so much more funny. It was more funny. I felt like I was a part of the scene. It really kind of engaged us and made us feel a part of the humor. And so after, I was like, what was that, man? And he's like, that was clown stuff that I was doing. So I was like, I want to learn that. So that was the first moment, the inclusion of the audience in the fun.
So it's not like they probably hear clown school, they're picturing a big top tent and cannons and clowns walking around with the big shoes everywhere. How would you define clown?
The way I see it, I mean, there's infinite ways to come at this, and they're all divisive. But I see clown presence. What I call clown presence is a state of being vulnerable and authentic to your audience, which is very transferable to public speaking, to any kind of communication. Which is antithetical to sarcasm. It's antithetical to pretending like nothing's wrong. It's being able to share authentically what's going on, but being confident enough to continue forward all the time.
Yeah, and I really like what you said there about its state of being transparent and vulnerable for an audience. Why do you think, speaking of clowns, I did some research. I thought this was really interesting. Coulrophobia, I think is what it's called. Coulrophobia, the fear of clowns. I saw this study by Morning Consult. More people, 42% of Americans are afraid of clowns, more so than this makes sense, right? Terrorist attacks, guns, a family member dying,
Oh my God.
economic collapse. This 36% Obamacare. That was interesting.
Huh.
But yeah, climate change, death, heights, needles, their spouse cheating, and then you got to throw ghost in there too. But
Wow.
why do you think that is? That clowns are up there? I think the only thing that's ahead of clowns are corrupt government. So
Good Lord.
interesting study.
First of all, it's very hip to be afraid of clowns. I'm with it. I love it. I love those movies.
Oh yeah.
I think this is my opinion on that because when I was a kid, did you ever go to Chuck E. Cheese or any of those
Oh yeah.
places, where they
Yeah.
have, well, I don't know if Chuck E. Cheese had characters where humans were in the big costumes or
They
if it was
did.
just the animatronics.
They had this like bear that was really creepy.
Yeah, like that scares me
Yeah.
because I know there's a person in there. I can't see their face and I don't really know what's going on with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when someone sees a clown with all the makeup, they are like, I don't really know what's going on with that person. And it's doubly weird because they're trying to look really happy. That it feels very insincere.
Yeah.
And certainly now that there's so many murder clowns out in pop culture, that's even more scary.
Yeah.
But the presence that I'm talking about is the opposite of that. It's
Yeah.
really being authentic and brave enough to bring my truth and share it. And I think that can scare some people too. Some people, they'd rather just be on the surface all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, like, with all this like authenticity and vulnerability, how does that impact like in Air Force? Like it just seems so hard to hold those two things.
Yeah, it's a really good question because for the longest time it was suck it up. You're in the military, suck it up, keep doing your job. You know what you signed up for. But I'm really proud to say, at least from what I've seen, the past, gosh, probably 5 years or so, mental health awareness, suicide prevention, all of that stuff has really, really been pushed, out in the forefront a lot more. And even, uh, I think we were teaching a class a while back, and my commandant at the time, it was virtual. He logged in to Teams and he was talking to everybody, and he said, "Yeah, I go to mental health." And I messaged him and I was like, I don't know if he was talking one-on-one. That's what it was. And I said, "I don't know if you know this, but you're in the room with everybody else and you just told all the students you go to mental health." And he's like, "Yeah, I have no problem with that." And when I heard him say that, my whole opinion on it had completely changed. And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, go." He's like, we practice our physical domain all the time, and what do? We take selfies and we post them on Instagram, and we work on spiritual. We do yoga and read and drink coffee and meditate. We post it. We go out with our friends for a social domain, and we're always taking, "Hey waiter, can you take a picture of us?" But when we work on ourselves mentally, it's like taboo. It's like we don't talk about it. And he's like, "We got to change that. That fourth pillar needs to be discussed." So I've been open on this show telling people I go to mental health. I'll tell my students I go to mental health or been to mental health, and that, yeah, things like that, and even emotional intelligence is starting to uh, be a lot more prominent, and people are really starting to tap into that stuff. So it's really changed a lot because if you're not mentally ready, if you've got something on your mind, I don't want you next to me in combat. You're just not prepared. And so I'm glad to see that change and kind of getting away from the just suck it up, you're in the military. So it's definitely going in the right direction.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so mental health, is that the therapist or something? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So like if you
Okay.
need to talk to someone like a therapist, I went in there and I was like, I need to take my car into the shop. So go in, had them start talking to me, and I'd been bottling stuff since I was a kid that I didn't even know. And the way she explained it to me is you take a bowling ball, you put it in the closet, something else happens, you stuff another one in there, and then you get to the point where you're 40 years old that closet's about to bust open, and that next time you open it up, they just come spilling out. So she focused on clearing out bowling balls from the closet, and
That's so great.
asked some
That's so
tough
awesome.
questions. But yeah, she's a better interviewer than I will ever be on the show. Just throwing that out there. But yeah, I think the thing to me that's so fascinating about how you define clown, and even how most people categorize it, uh, it's funny because half the people out there laugh at clowns, and the other half cry and run from them. So I just think that's what's so interesting about it. But speaking of that being transparent and vulnerable piece, you've conquered something else that a lot of people fear, which I'm surprised is not up there on the list with that, but public speaking. So talk to us about your journey. I'm sure it's not something you just, starting from spelling bees back into school, we're like, I'm really good at this. It's something a lot of people have to master. But when did you realize this is something I'm pretty good at?
Well, I think in terms of public speaking, it's kind of started with the improv, doing improv and enjoying that, and really enjoying giving an audience pleasure from me interacting, like
Mhm.
on impulse. That was really heartening and really felt great. And I started to think, I'm kind of good at this. Um, and I started looking into how can I be on stage and get paid, and um, not in a performative way.
Mhm.
Because my background is in the Midwest, like working for companies and things. I never really had an aspiration to be like a television actor, or even like uh, a paid touring performer, really. I always wanted to develop my skill and then put it to use with a company with money that could pay me, that I could be of service to. Or volunteer and just give it away. Like
Mhm.
I never really was going after like fame or anything like that. And kind of the first one-to-one was presenting at trade shows,
Yeah.
um, for companies. Because here's a situation where I can get up all day long, be fun, be silly, interact with an audience, and I'm helping a company do marketing. Like they need me because they can't do it. So I'm being of service in this situation. Um, so that was kind of what brought me into public speaking. And then as I did that, the trade shows didn't happen that often. I was like, I need to practice. So I joined Toastmasters in
Yeah.
LA, because I wanted to get myself in a situation. I highly recommend this to your audience. If you're the best way to get better is low stakes, regular practice. And
Mhm.
Toastmasters is a great way to do it. Taking an intro to improv class is an easy way to do it. Finding opportunities, if you have a spiritual community, they often will take like little short people who want to talk about something they're passionate about. Um, some kind of a situation where it's not high pressure. Like what's not helpful is doing one speech for work every 3 months that there's all eyes on you. That it's
Large
like
crowd, yeah.
not helpful.
Yeah.
Like, um, but if you do it enough, you'll get to there and you'll be like, I do this stuff all the time. I can handle it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I've actually told the story before about how I got picked up for the job as an instructor, and I had to go up in front of a group at a squadron all call and talk. And the more I was talking, the more my voice was crackling. And when I left there that day, I was like, "There's no way I'm gonna be able to teach. I can't speak in front of people." And you're right. Take it with a smaller group, get better and better, and build your way up. If they would have thrown me in front of 300 people at a graduation, I would have just crumbled at that point. But yeah, Toastmasters. I'm glad you brought that up because we have Toastmasters in the military, and I definitely recommend anyone that can get out there go check that out. But explain, like, what exactly is a typical Toastmasters meeting like?
Well, I imagine to someone as regimented as I imagine a military life would be, it's extremely structured. So
Hmm.
it's very and it's intentional, because if you're very nervous and control makes you feel more comfortable, you know exactly by the minute how the meeting will go. You'll have an agenda, you know exactly when you're getting up, you'll know exactly when you're getting evaluated. And I say that, don't be scared. It's very, very gentle peer evaluations.
Right.
Like there's someone who kind of hosts the meeting and and everyone is practicing, the host is not some special host. The host is a person who signed up to get better at hosting. So they're learning too. Every single person in the meeting who's taken a role is practicing their craft. People who are evaluating the speakers, usually a big problem is nobody wants to evaluate because everybody's like, I don't know what I'm doing either. But that's the point. Like everybody's doing the best they can. And a rising tide raises all boats. Everybody gets better by just trying and watching their peers try things, not do so great, do really great. You kind of take what you like and leave the rest and get better over time.
Yeah, I like that. Rising tide raises all boats. And what about the people who are, I told you before we hit record, I see this all the time at our schoolhouse. We have a successful things that educators do. And one of ours is bring humor. And my course that I teach at, it's pretty much like a public speaking 101 course. And because we focus on the verbals, nonverbals, all that kind of stuff. But I hear all the time, but I'm not funny. I can't be humorous. What do you say to those people?
Well, I think first I want to speak on a foundational level, and I'm sure you covered this maybe in an unspoken way in your courses, is it's important to build confidence or realize confidence that you're already enough. You are already enough. Even though we have some some obstacles we can clear away to make your message a little more clear, these aren't adding things that you didn't have. Like you yourself is awesome. And that is what we want to see. We're not trying to change who you are at your base, because that's the only thing that makes you unique. And I think it's important to work on building that, however people get to that point, because the danger of speaking and humor in particular is if I'm looking for validation from that audience that I'm an okay human, I'm in trouble, And we see a lot of famous performers who eventually go in a really bad direction because they are filling a hole with the response of the audience, and everybody has off nights. And if that happens, they suddenly feel like they're not enough. And that's really important to kind of wrestle with that. And it's something I wrestle with all the time. There's all kinds of different ways. There's talking to a mental health professional, spiritual practices, 12-step programs can help a lot. For me, figuring out a way that I'm not the smartest person in the world. There is a higher power that has a plan for me that I don't necessarily understand. Man, what a relief that is. Like, I don't have to be driving the damn boat all the time. That's helpful. But that being said, once you have that base of that you are enough, I'll give you three easy tips for humor. First is kind of a warning. Never make fun of your audience. Never make fun of what your audience loves. Second thing, one thing that's always safe, making fun of yourself. You can always do that. Self-effacing humor, always safe. And I would say stick to it. Stick to making fun of yourself. Yeah. So in terms of actual technical things from sketch comedy, first, rule of 3. Easy thing. If you are writing some kind of a script or a presentation, and you are giving 3 examples, what you do, I'm trying to think of an example in your world. We got to take good care of ourselves here at the Air Force. And what I mean by that, we got to exercise every day. We have to meditate, and we have to eat an orchard's worth of apples every week. Something where you take the idea and then you heighten it to a ridiculous amount on the third time.
Yep.
Because rule of three is 3 instances is the smallest amount to create a pattern. Humor is created by creating and breaking a pattern. So you start the pattern and then you tweak it a little bit on the third one. That's the most classic thing. Like the Groucho Marx joke. Last night I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I'll never know. Because we set up an expectation, we set up a pattern, then we break it. We break the pattern. The elephant was in his pajamas. What? We thought Groucho was in pajamas. Yeah.
Yep.
So same, different. Rule of three. That's one. The other thing, another one, number 2, if they laugh, do it more. This is clown. If a clown walks out, starts to do a thing, something they do inadvertently gets a laugh from the audience, the clown is so aware. They know that they just laughed when I just sat down. That clown is going to find opportunities to sit down again and again and get more laughs. So if you're in a presentation, you say something like, I'll never do that again. People giggle. Ding. Put a check mark next to it. Yeah. Find new opportunities to use that catchphrase again. So if they laugh, do it more. And then this one, last one, is if then. This one's a little bit subtle. So what I mean by if then, it's taking something you've said and mapping it into a different situation. This is getting complicated, I can tell. So let's see. So if you're saying, we need to cut budgets. We need to cut budgets by cutting back on, head count, reducing the number of days off, something like that. Okay. You can also say, I'm also cutting my budget at home. And then give some silly examples of things you're doing at home to cut budgets. So basically taking something you're doing in one scenario, putting it into a different location, and giving examples of that. That's basic sketch comedy right there.
No, that's good
stuff. Did I just completely confuse you?
No, because
I'm sorry.
No, because actually, as you were going over these, we really talk about the never make fun. I tell them, never go in a classroom and make fun of your class. You'll lose them. And also, if you can make fun of yourself, make fun of yourself. Don't act like you're superior. And then I like the rule. The rule of three reminds me of, I'm not sure if you're a sports fan or not, if you ever heard Jim Valvano. He gave a speech. It was one of my favorite speeches of all time at the ESPY Awards. And he said that he read a Vince Lombardi book. And he was like, Vince Lombardi would go into the Packers locker room and he wouldn't say anything. He'd wait till like a minute before they need to go on the field and build the suspense. And he'd bust through the door and he would just walk around staring at him. He'd say, we're going to win today if we do 3 things. If we play together, if we win for ourselves, God, and the Green Bay Packers. And he was like, ourselves, God, Green Bay Packers. I like it. And or like your family or friends, something like that on your first one. I've totally messed the story up. But then he ended up telling the story about how he was coaching at Rutgers basketball. And he was like, for, God, our family, Rutgers basketball, man, they're going to love that. And he said he ended up busting down the doors and he got in there and he was late and the door was locked. He ends up going through and he said, we're going to be successful if we do 3 things. If we win for our family, God, and the Green Bay Packers. the Rutgers basketball players were all looking around. But he killed the crowd with that story. So that kind of reminds me of that. But then amazing tools there for all of our listeners. And I'm not sure if have you seen The Dark Side of Comedy on Vice?
I have not.
You should check that out because a lot of what you were just talking about right there, I was applying to. Even when you were like, "Don't make fun of your audience," I was like, Andrew Dice Clay he made a lot of friends doing that. But it talks about, I think, Andrew Dice Clay, Dustin Diamond was on the previous one from Saved by the Bell. But who's Richard Pryor? They just had one on him, Roseanne. So some incredible comedians, and it talks about kind of what was going on behind the scenes. Chris Farley was the first episode.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, you should check that out. It's on Vice, but it's really, really good. So we've talked about, Toastmasters, improv. Before we get into book, like looking back at your journey, what would you say are some of those shadow moments in your life that you had to actually conquer? You mentioned the divorce, but what were some things you had to really conquer and make part of your journey and look at and say, you know what, I got no choice but to get better because of this.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it all revolves around that search for validation for me.
Mm.
Um, and that's a danger.
Oh yeah.
It's a danger, especially when in like a public persona kind of a situation or a public speaking situation where people can give you a lot of feedback like you're great, that's awesome, and then I'm like, oh, I am awesome, and I'm kind of building myself up based just on feedback, not
Hmm.
about how I really feel about myself, because that's harder work. That's like takes time and effort, and it's solo. It's not like everybody's clapping for you all the time.
Yeah.
um and I think it really came two moments. Well, one moment. I I did this 3 month tour as the host clown for this Cirque partner show called Empire. There's a show in Vegas called Absinthe at Caesar's Palace, and there's a kind of a version of that structure of a show that went on tour in North America. And I was lucky enough to be hired as the host, one of the host clowns for that. And so me and my partner, we were basically running the show every night for maybe 800 people in like a big top. And we were really, really like pretty risque clowns. It was kind of a grown up type show. And we would be the interstitials between all these amazing cirque acts in a small stage with a roundabout with 800 people all around us. And it was that perfect situation of like, I'm getting all this love, and then I go back to my apartment and it's nothing, like just nothing. I had no partner, no girlfriend at the time. And uh, it was a big rush at first, but then I was like, wow, this is almost worse than not doing it at all. Cause like this doesn't feel right. I don't really feel true. Like it's not what I thought it was going to be. And I really had to ask myself and be really honest about what are my motives for doing this? Like, am I trying to fill something in myself? And am I realizing right now that it is not working? Like, it is not making me happy. And so that job ended. The tour ended, and like soon after that, I kind of really had to rethink about why am I performing, and a lot of that is what brought me into teaching because again, being of service, like I was like, what skill set do I have? How can I actually help people with it? uh, I started to realize that what I learned about authenticity and vulnerability is I'd rather teach. That's the most helpful thing for people rather than go up and like kind of leverage this skill I have for laughs, and sometimes even pimp myself out a little bit of
Yeah.
like, look at how much I'm dumping myself out for you. And then I was like, ugh, this doesn't feel good. Like I'm
Yeah.
just like exposing my vulnerability for pay, kind of. That doesn't feel right either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really good because that answer kind of ties it back to what you were talking about, what you're willing to struggle for. And really, that's kind of what I can emulate a lot from is I've been the same boat where it's been like a search for validation, search of self-worth, like trying to prove yourself to other people. But I was telling someone not too long ago that look, I'm at peace right now. Like I don't, my anxiety, my stress levels have probably been at an all-time low because right now it's all about being in the service of others. So it's like you stop trying to feed you and feed others, and that really is where you start to. It's more rewarding. At least I think. But no, I think that's good stuff that you just said right there.
Yeah,
And
it's a big shift. And
it
like,
is.
and it kind of happens when it happens. Because if I would have tried to make that shift before, it would have been very insincere.
Yeah.
Um, but I put that that's in my book as one of the ways to combat stage fright
Yeah.
is to see if you can shift the focus of like, I hope they like me to I have this information that will really be helpful to them. How
Mm,
can I most efficiently get it to them? And some people, me included, that actually relaxes me. It kind of
yeah.
takes the pressure off me. And it's just like, I just need to get this information to these people. They need it. I have it. How can I make this transition effective?
I, I teach one more class before I get out of here, and I'm taking so many notes here that I'm going to be passing over to this next group that comes through here. This is good stuff. Speaking of your book, tell us a little bit about your book, Wink: Transforming Public Speaking with Clown Presence.
Yeah, it's a lot of the stuff we talked about with some. There's a chapter. Yeah, I broke it down into 5 P's: personal confidence, which is kind of what we talked about. How do you develop that I am enough foundation? Then preparation, which is kind of your standard public speaking, how to craft a speech, how to deal with rehearsals, that sort of thing. Moving into partnership, this is what we talked about, removing that fourth wall. So I'm listening to the audience as this is happening.
Hmm.
Then the fourth one is imperfection, dealing with when you have mistakes and how mistakes actually, the audience will like you more if
Oh yeah,
you embrace and own the mistakes and continue on in a confident way. It's not something to be ignored. And then finally is play. The final P is play, which we covered a little bit with those techniques for humor. But overall, I think there's a clown term called le jeu, which is the game. But at its base level, for a public speaker, it means learning to enjoy the dynamic between me and the audience and
mm,
to almost crave it. Like, I love that we're communicating, as opposed to, I don't want to communicate. Like, if I can have fun in that dynamic, even in the most serious of topics, if you're delivering bad news or something like that, if you can enjoy the dynamic between your audience and yourself, they're going to enjoy the communication as well.
yeah. If they want to get a copy of your book, where can you point them to?
Amazon. Check it out on Amazon, y'all. Yep. And I have a free exercise if anybody wants to work on this stuff. It's a exercise you can do with 4 people. It kind of drills you on audience awareness, which is so much of what we're talking about. I'm sure anybody who takes a public speaking class is great at memorizing, great at understanding what the structure of their speech is. The one thing that you can't practice or rehearse is responding to your audience as you're speaking. That's something that you don't really get to practice. This is a very structured exercise that people can drill that skill. If they just go to doncolliver.com/engage, they can get a free exercise there.
Okay. And we'll have all of that in the episode description. The book can also be found if you head over to theshadowspodcast.com and click on our resource recommendations. We'll have it listed for this episode. And I like these self-reflection questions here. Uh, what kind of person do you want to be known for 20 years from now?
Man, I feel like, did you ever do the artist way?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like an artist way question
Yeah, I actually
for
have it in the room
eulogy.
next to me. So
Yeah, it's so great, so great. Um, That's so interesting because it's changed.
mhm.
Now I think it's uh I was able to give people, saying permission feels like a word with a lot of unpleasant connotations, but
Mhm.
sometimes people do need permission to be authentic.
Yeah.
Uh to have given people the ability to be confidently authentic and vulnerable when they communicate. That's what I hope I'm remembered for.
Okay. And then if people want to find out more about you, where can you point them to?
I pretty much deal on LinkedIn. So just hit me up on LinkedIn, Don Colliver. I also am at doncolliver.com. But yeah.
All right. And then final comments for our listeners out there.
I think just I had to think of like a thesis for the book. And I think it's as easy as like, you folks, you're enough. You're already enough. There's just some things in the way that can be cleared away, but inherently you are enough.
Yeah, I like it. Well, folks, this has been an incredible episode. If you were ever trying to conquer your fear of clowns or public speaking, this has been the episode for you. So this has probably been one of our more impactful episodes. So definitely head over to the Shadows Podcast for all of our listeners. Leave us a review if you like what you're listening to here. Drop some comments here on the YouTube page and check out our coffee while you're at it. It's really good. Had some this morning. A little pre-workout, but yeah, definitely go give us some love over there at theshadowspodcast.com. Next week, we have another incredible episode heading your way. We have Jeremy Kubicek. He is the founder of Giant Worldwide and the author of 100X Leadership, 5 Voices, 5 Years, some incredible stuff. We're going to actually talk about his new book. And then we got our Halloween episode with Michael Bailey Smith. He was Super Freddy, Hills Have Eyes. That's some incredible work. Loved that episode. Really cool episode. And we got that one coming your way on Halloween. So, folks, until next week, that's going to conclude this episode of the Shadows Podcast.